Welcome to another video. This week we will be learning how to score scenes involving tragedy and grief. In other words, we will be learning how to write music that sounds like this. Now, the first step to scoring any emotion is to start by figuring out how to describe that emotion in the first place. And for this, there are at least 3 different things that we need to consider: valence, size, and movement. Valence refers to how positive or negative your target emotion is. Another way to think about it would be how pleasant/unpleasant it is, or how dark or how bright the emotion is. Tragedy and grief are both extremely dark emotions, which means that to portray them, we will need to write music that also sounds dark. Size refers to how overwhelming or all-consuming an emotional experience is. The more overwhelming the emotion, the larger your music should sound. Grief and tragedy are both large-scale emotions, which means you should be writing some pretty large-scale music if you want to portray them. Finally, movement refers to how energizing or depleting your emotion tends to be. You can also think of this as how much energy and movement are involved with the physical expression of your target emotion. And while there are countless different ways that individuals can express grief, some of the most cinematic types involve weeping, crying, and other physically expressive motions. So, you'll probably want to write some music that matches this energy level and includes a moderate amount of movement. So, all in all, the kind of grief and tragedy that I want to portray in this video can be described as dark, large, and medium energy. This means that the music I want to compose should also sound dark, large, and medium energy. Of these 3, valence is typically the simplest and most straightforward. Your strongest tool for controlling how dark or bright your music sounds is to just simply control your harmony. In this case, to create a dark mood for our target emotion, we want to create a chord progression that emphasizes minor harmonies. Since I've already covered this type of harmony in my video on composing requiems, we won't worry about spending too much time on the topic here. For now, just know that writing any chord progression in a minor key and emphasizing minor triads will be more than sufficient for this template. You can also throw in a few sus chords or diminished triads if you'd like, but they are not necessary. The biggest impact on making this music sound tragic and not just generically sad will actually come from the movement and size parameters. Speaking of which, let's talk about movement next. Lots of things can impact the amount of movement in your music, but for this video, we're going to focus on just 3 simple strategies. The first is to work with a relatively slow tempo. I recommend somewhere between 60 to 75 beats per minute. This piece was written at 60 BPM. The second strategy is to emphasize relatively long note lengths. By this, I just mean that the majority of your notes should be mostly quarter notes or longer. For example, in this piece, I wrote 2 different themes. Theme number 1 uses mostly quarter notes and half notes, with only a few shorter note values thrown in here or there. To compose this theme, I used something called sentence structure, which means that I started with an initial 2-bar idea. Then I repeated the same basic idea, but with a little bit of variation. Then I came up with a brand new idea. And then finally, I just found a way to end the whole thing. Now, if you would like to learn more about writing melodies, I recommend checking out my playlist on melody writing for composers or my recorded live stream on different melodic structures, both of which have links in the description of this video. Melody number 2 also emphasizes mostly quarter notes and half notes, with only a few shorter notes thrown into the mix. However, this theme uses period structure, which was the same strategy I covered in my video on scoring joy and excitement. Start with an initial motivic idea. Introduced a new motif. Then repeat the same basic initial idea with some variation if you'd like. Before finding a satisfying way to just end the melody. So with the slow tempo and longer note values successfully reducing the overall energy of our piece, we can use the third strategy to help build it back up just a little bit, which is to focus on using melodic accompaniment. Using counter melodies and counterpoint instead of sustained chords helps add additional layers of movement to an arrangement, which helps give the sound a bit more nuance and personality. The additional layers also help contribute to the overall size of your sound, which is an important component in portraying tragedy and grief. Now, once again, I have already created a few different videos dedicated to just this topic, so we won't dive too deeply, but if you would like to learn more about writing counter melodies and counterpoint, check out the link in the description of this video. Finally, the very last component of our emotional profile is size. The two most reliable strategies for controlling size in your music are to control your dynamics and to control the number of different layers or octaves in your music. One strategy that I used to take advantage of both tools was to start my arrangement out quite small and then gradually build in size. The very first section of this piece uses solo viola on melody and divisi strings on chords. As it grows, I add additional instruments like a solo violin doubling the melody in octaves. And then eventually a fully fledged string section playing a new counter melody, which does move a bit faster than the melody, but which ultimately gets balanced out by a bass line that moves more slowly than the melody. Another useful strategy is to double important layers of your music in octaves. We saw a demonstration of this already in Melody 1, but Melody number 2 takes the strategy a step further. First, by doubling the bass line and melody in octaves, and then raising the melodic voices up an entire octave to add even more impact. These strategies help the music physically take up more space across the frequency spectrum, which gives your music added size and impact. Finally, my favorite strategy to help take the octaves a step further is something called a chordal texture, which just essentially doubles the melody rhythmically, but uses chordal tones to create a richer and more colorful sound. For example, you can see here in measure 25 that half of the second violins are playing the exact same rhythm as the melody, but they're not playing the same pitches, instead choosing to play notes that are found naturally in the underlying chord progression. Then in measure 29, the celli join in, and once again together they play the same exact rhythm as the melody, but with different pitches. This simple little technique helps elevate the whole thing and make it feel larger and even more lush. The result of all these strategies combined ends up creating a massive wall of sound that just perfectly captures the heightened size and expression of tragedy when compared to other lower energy forms of sadness. So, to summarize, the secret to scoring tragic and grief-stricken scenes is to start with a slow tempo around 60 to 75 BPM and a simple chord progression written in a minor key. Then, as you write your melodies, focus on using mostly longer note values, like quarter notes or longer. These strategies will help you create a generally sad-sounding mood for your music. And then to build things up into a more powerful and tragic sound, add additional movement by using melodic accompaniment such as counterpoint or counter melodies. Finally, you can make strategic use of gradually growing octaves and chordal structures to build the necessary size needed to portray such an overwhelming emotion. And with that, we have reached the end of another video. If you would like to learn my process for making these templates, check out my online class or my ebook on portraying emotions with music. Tomorrow is my 28th birthday, so everything on my shop is currently 28% off. I will have a link in the description. I want to take a quick moment to thank my wonderful patrons who make videos like this one possible. I also want to thank each and every one of you who show your support through various things like subscribing to my channel and sharing my videos. I appreciate each of you more than you know. So until next time, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music, my friends. I will see you in the next video.